Hi class, this is course 3, lesson 7, rates and average, and also talking about measures of central tendency. So here's some vocabulary for you. A rate is a division relationship between two measures. Unit rate is a special type of rate where the second measure is 1, and these are the ones that we would be really familiar with. Some examples are like 55 miles per hour, and that per hour, what that's really telling you is that it's 55 miles. Per would be to divide, and then you'd have 1 hour, because it says per hour. It didn't say per 2 hours, so it's per 1 hour. That's that division relationship. And since it's a unit rate, this is a 1. So 55 miles in 1 hour or per hour. And here's the abbreviation for miles per hour. Another example would be like 30 miles per gallon, 30 mpg. 32 feet per second. And that would look like this, 32 feet per second. Okay, there's not a nice little mpg, it's feet/second. And remember that that would be a 1 in front of there, so it would really be 32 feet per 1 second. Okay, so that's kind of how that looks. Or $1.89 per pound, $1.89 / pound. That slash is the division again. Okay, now this may be a little tricky, but I'm going to try to explain this as best I can. And if you have questions, make sure to jot them down in the side of your notes and ask me in class. We can multiply 2 units in story problems. Now, you're not always going to multiply, okay? But if they give you the number of hours and you know the miles per hour, you can find miles. Notice how number of hours times miles per hour. If I wrote that out, it would be hours times miles per divided by hours equals. Do you see how hours here would be like in the numerator spot? So if I can cancel that or divide that out with the hours in the denominator over here, that leaves me with just 1 and 1. So then when I multiply that, whatever number is here and whatever is here, I end up with just miles. So that's how that works. Gallons, number of gallons times miles per gallon will give you the number of miles. Number of seconds times feet per second will give you feet. And number of pounds times the cost per pound will give you the cost. Again, all of these numbers over here would end up being in a numerator position, or all of these, because they come after the per, would be in a denominator. Okay, so you kind of have to think through that a little bit, but that should help you get started. Okay, here's an example for you. Sarah rode the 200-kilometer bike race in 8 hours. What was her average speed in kilometers per hour? Okay, that's a little different than the problems we just did. I'll let you pause here, and I will explain when you resume the video. Okay, so pause, press resume when you're ready. Okay, so Sarah rode the 200-kilometer bike race in 8 hours. Okay, they want us to find the average speed, and they tell us they want kilometers per hour. Okay, so that's really simple. We set up a fraction with kilometers. That division bar, fraction bar, means to divide, means per. So we're going to put hours in the bottom. Okay, we can fill in the blanks then. We know it was 200 kilometers, and we know that it was 8 hours. Okay, but here's where it gets tricky. This is not your answer. What was her average speed in kilometers per hour? Okay, and maybe that should have just said per hour. So it wants it per 1 hour, so you have to divide that out, and when you do that, you get 25 kilometers per hour. Okay, that's how that works. Moving on here to measures of central tendency, there are 4 that you can report on. One is average, and that's the central number found by adding all the values and then dividing by the number of numbers. Okay, so if you have 8 elements or 8 numbers that you're adding up, you would add them up and then divide by 8. It's also called the mean, so those are interchangeable. When you see those, we're going to add them up and divide. Median is the central number when the numbers are arranged in increasing order. So you have to put them in order and then find the middle number. And if there happens to be 2 in the middle, then you average them. Okay, so after you count back, if you end up with a 8 and a 10, you would add them together, get 18, and then divide by 2 to find the median of 9. Mode is the most frequently occurring number or numbers. Okay, if you have in a very long list of numbers, if you have the number 17 twice and you have the number 20 twice, then you report the mode as being 17 and 20. The range is the difference between the greatest and least numbers in a list. So it's just what is the smallest. Now remember, you're going to have those in order or identify which one is the smallest. Don't just take the first number that they give you. Figure out the smallest and the largest and subtract. Oh, well, that's the same thing that we just went over. Not sure why that's there. Example 5. In your book, you need to look at this. Okay, I copied it here. But what it goes over is, here's some data. Here are the home prices in thousands of dollars. And they want to know, first you have to find the mean, the median, and the mode, and then which measure should a researcher use to best represent the data. Okay, so those measures of central tendency are used to report out on or represent data, and they can be misleading if you use them inappropriately, or they can tell a different story depending on which one you use. So here's the graph of all of those numbers. Okay, so if you find the mean, you add them all up and you get that it's approximately 190 after you divide by 12, and that would be $190,000. The median, you put them in order, and then you find, here's a good example where we had to average 2 numbers. So the median would be 186,000. And then the mode, the most frequently occurring number, is 175, which would be 175,000. Okay, and this is kind of important right here. Again, you don't have to write this in your notes. Okay, so I apologize if you were already writing it down. It's just an example that we need to talk through a little bit. So if you have somebody interested in property tax revenue, the mean would be a good statistic to report. So you can tell people that $190,000 is the average or the mean. And if you look back at this chart, you can see that half of them are on the lower end and half are on the larger or the higher end. But if you're talking property values or property tax revenue, the average is going to be good because you're going to get half of it from the lower end and half from the higher end. Okay, but if you're talking about prospective buyers, okay, so those are people looking to buy a house, the median is a good statistic to report. It tells the buyer that half of the new homes cost less than $186,000. Okay, so that's a little different than if you just look at this and say, oh, that's about half and that's about half. 186,000 gives people a nice point in the middle, and yeah, it's not that much different than 190,000, but it is different. The mean, okay, the mean could be misleading to a buyer because its value is greater than the median because of a few expensive homes. Only 1/3 of the homes were sold for more than $190,000. Okay, so you can see in this list we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that were less than that. So it's not quite the center. Now, if you used the mode to represent, and this isn't in the example, but if you used mode and said that the average or the central tendency number for the price of homes was 175,000, look at this graph or look at the numbers. Is that representative of the data? Well, it's right here. And if you look at the list, you have 2 houses that sold for $175,000 or in a neighborhood, and one at $170,000, and everything else is much more expensive than that. So that's not a good number to use to represent the data. Okay, all 3 are measures of central tendency. However, Some are better than others depending on the situation to represent the data, and you really have to think about it and use a lot of logic to understand how this works. So as you answer questions in the lesson, if you have something come up like this and you're not sure what to do, just ask me. Okay, that's all I have for today, and I will see you in class.